What I wanted to particularly do is to reach out to our African American community leaders to see about their first feelings about supporting Fred, and it was a very good response. And then I felt it would be important for us to come together as a group to illustrate that point. So this morning we had a representation of the host committee that was designed just for that purpose, African American community leaders supporting Fred DuVal. And we want to be able to not only show him, but go back to our respective communities and broaden that appeal.
I think whoever is going to be the next governor, one thing that they have to do is make sure that they're continuously talking to people in all communities. Fred took time out of his day to have one-on-one conversations, not only at the grassroots level, but at the grass tops level, meeting with individuals in elected positions, but also meeting with neighbors on the street. And I think that's going to make Fred an outstanding governor as he's getting perspective from all individuals in all communities.
I'm here to tell you that what we're doing isn't working. Just to put it plain, we are in trouble. Coming home from an event some weeks ago, Jennifer and I stopped at a burger joint, 9:45 at night. And nobody was there except a couple of kids sitting in the corner, eating, homework, doing some, they were well past their bedtime. They shouldn't have been there. I knew it. I looked around, nobody in the restaurant except the woman behind the cash register. And I said, "Are you their mom?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, tell me your situation." She said, "Well, I had a good job in manufacturing. My company went belly up. I had benefits. They disappeared in a bankruptcy. I struggled. I tried to find other work in my skill set. I've got an associate's degree. I really thought I could stay in the industry. Didn't work out. Ended up with 2 minimum wage jobs, one a minimum wage job all day, then picks up the kids, takes them to the Burger King, and has a second minimum wage at night." And in fact, our economic growth is losing good, middle-class, stable jobs, often with benefits, to multiple minimum wage jobs. It is happening across the state of Arizona. Our unemployment rate is a point above the national average. Our poverty rates are going up while countries are coming down. We are absolutely moving the wrong way in this economy.
You know, the issues are mirrored across the United States here in Arizona. You have education, you have employment, you have police brutality, you have the growing population of poor people wandering the streets, you have medical challenges. I believe Fred understands those because not just because what he says, but you can believe in what he says. He has a genuineness to him. He has and I've only met him a couple of times and I listened to it a few times, but I enjoy what he says because I can understand it. It's in terms that anyone can grasp it, relate to it, and then he has a plan behind it, and his plan is a sound plan.
The cuts to K-12 education have become decimating, catastrophic. A woman came up to me at a town hall and she said, I'm a single mom. I work here, I make about 27 a year, doing okay, but struggling. The school sizes of my kids are now 35, 36. They're asking me to go in my pocket for sports and art costs. I can't afford it. And as she talked about her kids, she started to cry. And she hugs me and she said, "Here's what's most important." She said, "No mother or no father should feel this way, but I feel powerless to change their future." And then it was as though a light went on. And then she looked at me and she said, "But you can get that power." And I thought, that's right.
So the most important issue that was brought up today was education. Fred spent time on the Board of Regents, and I think he has dialed in exactly what it takes to move our education forward. Fred fundamentally believes, just as I do, that students in all communities deserve an excellent education, and I look forward to working with him as he continues to fight for the state of Arizona and for our kids. When we look at our high school graduation, our graduates, we see that less than, a little over 50% of them, even once they've done everything that their counselors have told them, they still don't qualify for a four-year university. So you've seen a huge amount of individuals, particularly people of color, who are pushed into our community colleges, which I think are great, for our economy, great starters to really get individuals in sectors. But one thing that I do fundamentally believe is that all kids, no matter what community, should have an opportunity to attend a college, a university system. I know you've talked a lot about the funding mechanisms for K-12. From a policy side, what are some of the things that you're looking to really push forward?
I think of talent as a pipeline.
Yeah.
And there are leaks all the way along that are systemic and fixable. And Jesse probably has some insights around this, certainly in the K-12 space. But let me expand and look at this from a K-20 perspective. That you simultaneously withdraw from kindergarten as a state public policy and pass a third grade reading test is idiotic.
Absolutely.
Because you will now assuredly produce many third graders who are not reading, marked with a stigma, simply that could have been addressed by an earlier start.
An important issue, I would hope, for all of us is education. And Fred, that's certainly been a high point on all of his campaign material, and him personally, as I know him. So his response to concerns about education, I felt, were very, 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 very good this morning in terms of how he would not cut education any further. You know, it's going to be a difficult task. It's going to take a lot of collaboration, how to put funds back into preschool, and how important it is to have an educational system that works well, has to have flexibility to it. So I think there was a great deal of satisfaction with his response to that very, very high priority.
At ASU recently, I was in a classroom about 80 students. These are juniors and seniors. We've all invested in them. They're the best and brightest among our young adults. And I asked 80 students, how many of you are from Arizona? Most were. How many of you plan to be here and make your lives here? 3 hands went up. So I called the regents. I said, tell me what we know about our flee rate. And sure enough, the rate of departure of our university graduates is the highest it's ever been. Businesses are not coming. Talent is leaving. And our economy is headed in the wrong direction. If that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what it is. A large percentage of our school districts let the students out at noon 1 day a week in order to save money. Teachers haven't gotten raised for 3 or 4 years. We've withdrawn from kindergarten. We now have the second lowest percentage of children in kindergarten in the United States. We lose a third of our teachers every 3 years. We lose 50% of our teachers every 5 years. I'm going to keep the legislature in session until Christmas if I have to, but I'm not going to sign a budget that cuts another nickel from public education. Now, in 2009, 2010, where we cut $400 million from universities in 1 year, and it was chaos, and we sold dorms and we privatized ground crews, and we went through it with a rake and we found everything we could, but we weren't going to close a campus. We raised financial aid, but then Reginald, what I did is I founded something which I think is the template, and I want to work with you and others on how to take this all the way through the system. We built aztransfer.com, and we went to the universities and community colleges and said, look, these 2 models don't serve us well anymore because they're not in perfect alignment, and students should be it should be a demand-driven, not a supply-driven model, where we provide content to students where they are, when they need it, at a price point they can handle. You can go online now and take courses from community colleges and universities from multiple schools around your schedule, and you can get a degree at about 1/3 less cost. I mean, the worst thing you see is gifted, smart students who are disincentivized because they're in an environment that doesn't maximize their potential. I think we can get at a lot of that through internet tools.
He recognizes some of the faults that have haunted us in the past, and how he needs to bring both parties on both sides of the aisle together to make things happen for the state.
Notice I don't talk about Republican, Democrat. It's sort of tangential to what I'm about. It's creating an entrepreneurial, startup, change-oriented, innovation-oriented based economy around human talent. And to do that, you've got to borrow from startup principles that the right embraces, and you've got to embrace the inclusionary politics of social justice that the left embraces. And that's the path forward. We have some of the best schools in the nation, in both the charter and the traditional space, and we have failures in both. And 85% of our children go to the neighborhood school, most of them choosing to do so. And the notion that we are going to pick winners and losers based upon an approach that sends many kids packing and out of those schools and into other schools is not replicable, and it's not something you can take to scale. I think it's terrific that we have high-performing high schools. But it is not a model that you can replicate across every school district. Every school is different. You've got to account for socioeconomics, you've got to account for culture, you've got to account for neighborhoods, you've got to account for success valuation. There is a variety of dynamics involved in the schools. And the fact that you can build one pathway that works for some students who have access to parental transportation and other things is terrific for those students. It is not the way we build a statewide school system.
I just think that Fred's going to do an outstanding job. I've known him for decades, back with his Bruce Babbitt days, and I've been very, very impressed with how he's carried himself and the things he's gotten done. And I'm impressed with his platform in terms of how he would go about making the governor's office a lot more efficient.
But I think it's important for others to hear how your plan of action in working with a tough legislative group.
Right.
What are some of your plans? How are you going to make sure that there is an inclusiveness? Because that's important to getting things done.
Cut my teeth with Bruce Babbitt back in the early 80s, and it was the most productive half-decade in, I believe, 21st century. We forged a relationship with Bert Barr and with Republicans where we would fight like crazy, but people would keep showing up on a regular basis and talk about the big strategic things. And is that every issue doesn't have the same 16 and 31. And the only way you put 16 and 31 together is to constantly have everybody in front of you and listening to where you find common ground, recognizing that you and I will disagree on 8 things. And then all of a sudden, I hear something, and we note it, and we say, on that one, you're my partner. Every year, we set a July 4th deadline that we would agree on the one thing that had to happen for the state that year, no matter what else, and we would be willing to trade anything else against it. 1980 was the Groundwater Act, 1981 was state trust lands, 1982 was access. It failed. 1983 was access again. 1984 was a statewide teacher salary increase. 1985 was the Phoenix Freeway system. And each time, spent weeks and weeks talking, what is the one thing that most has to happen? And make sure that you preserve enough collaborative capacity to get that done.
I think it's important to let him know that we are behind him. We support his ideas regarding education, the economic development, and as far as changing the image here in Arizona.
And I start from a very different premise than Doug does. I believe that the way you build jobs of the future is around talent. It's around investing in human potential and human capacity. That talent comes white and black and red and yellow and rainbow and foreign. If you want to embrace talent, you got to embrace all of it. And you got to say you are all welcome here. And that's why the 1062s and the 1070s are horrific, discriminatory social and cultural policy, but they're bad economic policy. The combination of those issues and our K-12 non-investment strategy have eroded our brand and our viability to the point that it is clear that better workforce will drive venture capital and drive business relocation. And so the link between education and creating jobs is now, I believe, established. And unlike other things in the economy, access to oceans or access to soil, the decision to invest in human talent is a policy choice. And different cultures, the Finnish are doing it, the Koreans are doing it, different states are doing it, and some are not, and Arizona is not. Talent is equally distributed in the world. Savannah has it. The next door neighbor may not. It may be there yes and there no. Completely randomly distributed. Opportunity is not. And the gap between the distribution of talent and the distribution of opportunity is what our job is. That's really what our focus has to be. And Arizona is making those choices wrong. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I'm viable. I'm in a toss-up race.
Well, there was a wide variety of issues that were brought up. There was issues about education, economic development, issues about holding the police accountable. I think Fred DuVal has a great grasp of understanding what is necessary to bring the state back into prominence within the United States. What are some of the things that you're going to do to hold the police department accountable, to build better relationships within the community, and just overall just making sure that we are bound by the laws, make sure that it works for us and not feel like it works against us?
I guess my takeaways from the incidences in Missouri and elsewhere is a couple of things. Training is hugely important. Establishing cultural mores of community respect, enormously important. The quality of leadership in creating those cultures is enormously important. The tonality coming from those in senior elected positions, mayors and governors, enormously important. Calling out the National Guard is a very blunt instrument, and I don't know if that's a smart way to go. We've certainly come a long way in many regards, but it is clear these events open up these fissures and remind us how much more work has to be done. There was a pardon of some Puerto Rican terrorists, to use their word, and they're accusing me of enabling the murder of American citizens because I was CC'd on an email that was FYI, that the Office of Legal Counsel was noted. And, there's I have no role at all in this. I was one of 80 people CC'd on an email. Some people will win at any cost. And I don't know how they sleep at night.
There's been kind of a growing concern, if you will, that the African American community, in some views, may have become less relevant, less important, less reached out to, so to speak. So I wanted to do what we can to kind of diminish that consensus or that conclusion. So we think it's important that we have our elected officials, particularly those in statewide offices, be able to ensure us that there were going to be some realistic reaching out. Diversity will be a part of their policy making, and that they will be able to illustrate both in terms of appointments and actions and policies that they take does in fact include the African American community and very capable leaders that we have that exist within those communities.